start tonight with chapter 17, verse 1. Question 1 says, we learned in Revelation 16:19, that was last night when we were studying the 7 last plagues. We learned in Revelation 16:19 that during the 7th plague, God's judgments are poured out on Babylon. We might want to just, if you have your Bible, you can look right above chapter 17 and review verse 19 of chapter 16. It says, and the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And great Babylon came in remembrance before God, to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. That was during the 7th plague. God's judgments were poured out on Babylon. Now it says, what is the angel explaining to John in chapter 17? So chapter 17, verse 1. And there came one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials. These are the angels with the 7 last plagues. And talked with me, saying unto me, come hither. I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. So the answer that you're to write in your blank there was the angel was explaining to John the judgment of the whore that sits on many waters. I'm going to explain this to John. The judgment of the whore that sits on many waters. So now let's look at the symbols. It says identify the symbols. All right? The woman. Revelation chapter 17, verse 18 tells us what the woman is. It says, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. And if we skip back to verse 19 of chapter 16, it says, and the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon came in remembrance before God. So this woman represents Babylon. Okay? Babylon. Now, right in the center tonight, we have a poster of what we're studying. This is Revelation chapter 17. Okay? And that is Babylon. So when we refer to Babylon tonight, this is the symbol that we're referring to. Now it says, the next symbol is a fallen woman or a whore. Go back in the Old Testament, because this is a recapitulistic historist Bible seminar. Ezekiel chapter 16. Ezekiel chapter 16. Symbolism of Revelation is borrowed from the Old Testament. Revelation chapter 16. And you might want to read that whole chapter sometime when you have time. Go back over your notes. But for tonight, I want to start with verse 1. It says, again the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, cause Jerusalem to know her abominations. And then skip to verse 28. Verse 28, he's talking to Jerusalem, which was the capital of God's people, the church. It says, thou hast plagued the whore. Jerusalem plagued the whore. Also with the Assyrians, because thou wast unsatiable. Yea, thou hast played the harlot with them, and yet couldst not be satisfied. Verse 29, thou hast moreover multiplied thy fornications in the land of Canaan unto Chaldea, and yet thou wast not satisfied herewith. And when you read the whole chapter there, you'll find that God is really upset with his church, which was the church, Judah, Israel, because they had begun to worship the Assyrian gods and the Babylonian gods, and they were getting involved with false religion. And he said, you're a whore. Okay, so the symbolism is when God's church, when God's people bring in false things into the religion, God calls that a whore. Okay? So a fallen woman or a whore is a fallen church. A church that's been untrue to Christ. Church that's been untrue to Christ. Okay, and then the next one says waters. We can go back to Revelation chapter 17, verse 15 again. And it says, "And he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues." So the waters represent lots of people, many people. Now then, the summary says chapter 17 is a zoom in. In this day of video cameras, you understand zoom in, right? Maybe Don back there is zooming in on me once in a while. It's a zoom in of the events described in Revelation chapter 16, verse 19. This is another recapitalism. You see, last night when we studied the 7 last plagues, the prophecy took us from the beginning of the plague clear through to the end of the world when Jesus comes. Now we're doing another recapitalism. We're backing up and we're zooming in on the last part of those plagues, the fall of Babylon. So that you see how many recapitulations we've had. I hear people in the hall still trying to wrap their tongue around that word, recapitulating history. But by now I think you've got the idea of what it means, right? It means we go along and then we back up and we fill in some more details. So this symbol is a recapitulation of what we studied when we studied these 3, really. You remember last night we learned, or no, not last night, but the night before that, on Thursday night, we learned that the United States will give, wait a minute, I thought something was wrong there. Even the teacher gets mixed up once in a while. I had them in the wrong order, didn't I? You'll let me fix that, I'm sure. Chalk it up to human frailty. Okay. There. We learned that this is the symbol of the United States. This is the symbol of medieval Christianity, the church in the Dark Ages. We learned that the United States, God prepared that to be a haven for his true persecuted Christians that had to flee from this, and that's the Pilgrim story and all that. But then we learned that at the very end of time, and so we're living about right here, so at the very end of time, the United States will foster another political system that is similar to the one in the Dark Ages, and it's called the image to the beast. And the similarity is that during this period of time, religious forces, the church, will control the government. And we're going to learn a little later on this evening that this is the time of the one world government. You've heard that phrase, haven't you? Everybody's talking about how there's going to be a one world government. Well, according to the book of Revelation, it's going to happen, and this is it. Well, that's what we studied. This chapter 17 is a recapitulation of this. So we're backing up and restudying this under a different symbol, a recapitulation. Okay? Number 2. Why has this religious organization become fallen? Verse 2, it says, "With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication." So the answer is, it's committed fornication with the kings of the earth. This religious organization has committed fornication with the kings of the earth. People living on earth are drunk because of her fornication. Now, fornication. We got an idea from the last passage we read in Ezekiel, but let's go over to Ezekiel chapter 23. Ezekiel chapter 23. This imagery is borrowed again from history. We'll just read the first six, the first 6 verses here. First 5 verses, okay? Ezekiel chapter 23. It says, "The word of the Lord came again unto me, saying, Son of man, there were 2 women, the daughters of one mother, and they committed whoredoms in Egypt. They committed whoredoms in their youth. There were their breasts pressed, and there they bruised the tits of their virginity. And the names of them were Aholah the elder, and Aholabah her sister. And they were mine, and they bare sons and daughters. Thus were their names. Samaria is Aholah, and Jerusalem is Aholabah." And you can read the rest of the chapter there, that Jerusalem and Samaria were God's people. And they began to make alliances, political alliances, as well as accepting the gods of Egypt and Babylon and all these other places, in Assyria. So instead of trusting in God to deliver them and take care of them in their troubles, they went to civil governments, the Assyrians, and they made alliances. And this happened many times. And one time the prophet came and said, "Is it because there's no God in Israel that you go to the Assyrians for help?" See? And God says that when his people go to, what do I want to say, non-Christian? Go to non-Christian sources for help, God says, that's fornication. That's an illegitimate relationship. Does God need any help from any human government? Absolutely not. God is King of kings and Lord of lords. And so when his people try to get help from civil governments, God calls that fornication. Clear back from the Old Testament. So fornication is any unlawful relationship. Any unlawful relationship. And that's what it means, if we're talking about men and women. Any unlawful relationship between a man and a woman is fornication. In a spiritual sense, because the church is the bride of Christ, he says any unlawful relationship that my church gets into, my church has committed fornication. And drunk, let's go to Jeremiah chapter 51 and verse 7. See what the Bible means, what the symbolism of being drunk with. Okay, Jeremiah chapter 51 and verse 7. Jeremiah 51 verse 7 says, "Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad." That means insane. It means they've lost their reason. So to be drunk is they lost their reason. So they've lost their reason. So this is a symbol of the one world government. When the church has entered into relationships with the civil power, that's an illegitimate relationship. So the church is a whore. And because of that, it says the whole world loses their reason. Now, think a minute with me about religious fanaticism. In religious fanaticism, do people lose their reason? Absolutely. I would think about, not just the Christian religion, think about the Islamic religion. Think about the Taliban, fanatical in the Islamic religion. And in the Islamic religion, women are supposed to wear a veil. Most Islamic people are pretty reasonable. But the Taliban, you don't wear a veil, we're going to kill you. That's fanaticism. That's craziness. are Christians any different? I don't want to get into this abortion issue, but just think about it for a minute. Some Christians are just radical about abortion. You should not do abortion. Well, could be. But they go one step farther. If you are involved in abortion, we're going to kill you. And we've got all this rash of killings at abortion clinics. They've lost their reason. Religious fanaticism makes people lose their reason. Now, number 3. What happened to John? Got to get back to Revelation chapter 17. Revelation chapter 17 and verse 3. It says, "So he carried me away in the Spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of the names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." So the answer is, in vision, he was moved to the future. Remember we studied in chapter 1 about visions. And in the vision, God, it's like the person was there. Now it's important that we understand in Revelation 17 that in vision, John is carried from where he is. He's carried away. He's carried into the future. And number 4, what symbol did he see? Let's read verses 3, 4, and 5. "So he carried me away in the Spirit in the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of the names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth." You see how this imagery is borrowed from what we read in Ezekiel. Babylon is a golden cup, etc., etc. So the answer that we're going to write in, what did he see? He saw a woman, sitting on a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Her clothes were purple and red, and her name is Mystical Babylon. So if you want to, once again, focus in on the poster that I have here. He says he saw a woman, and she sat on a scarlet-colored beast, and this beast is full of blasphemy, and the beast has 7 heads, and it has 10 horns, and the woman's arrayed in purple and red, and she's decked out with gold and precious stones and pearls, and she has a golden cup in her hand full of abominations. And her name is Babylon. So Revelation chapter 17 is the prophecy of mystical Babylon. Number 5, what was this woman drunk with? We'll read verse 6. "And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with a great admiration." So she's drunken with the blood of saints and martyrs. Now remember that this is a recapitulation of what we studied here. This is a recapitulation of the prophecy of the time when the religious forces of the world will control the governments of the world. And according to what we've studied, religion will control all the governments of the world. And it says that this woman, this situation is drunken with the blood of saints and martyrs. Who are saints? Christians, church members. So, during this time in history, the church will kill its own members. And that's happened before, remember, in the Dark Ages, the church killed 60 million of its own members. And drunken with the blood of martyrs. And we studied in the Mark of the Beast that the final crisis that this is all about is the commandments of God, just like Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, only this time it's the fourth commandment, the Sabbath commandment. During this era, the governments, inspired by the religious forces, will pass a law that says if you don't disobey the fourth commandment, you'll be killed. Now, it probably won't be couched in those terms. In the days of Daniel, it didn't say, if you don't disobey the first commandment, you'll be killed. It didn't say that, did it? It said, if you don't bow down and worship the king, you'll be killed. But that is a violation of the first commandment. And in Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, it didn't say, if you don't disobey the second commandment, you'll be killed. It says, if you don't worship my idol, you'll be killed. Same thing. So we don't know what that law will say, but obedience to that law will mean that you disobey the fourth commandment and desecrate the Sabbath. So, since there's blood of martyrs involved, it tells us that some of God's people will lay down their lives rather than disobey one of his commandments. I gave you that challenge last night. I hope you've been thinking about that. Is my love for Jesus the kind of love that I would die rather than disappoint and disobey him? Okay, number 6. What does the angel tell John he is going to do? That's verse 7. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. So, the angel says he's going to interpret the symbols. Revelation is, as you can see, it's not that difficult if you just take it one step at a time. In this prophecy, he says, I'm going to interpret this symbol for you. I'm going to explain what this is. Now, because we've been going through the prophecy, we already have a feeling for what it is. And so let's see if what I've suggested, that this is a recapitulation of what we studied here, is really the case. Number 7 says, verse 8 can only be understood if we determine a time frame. What time frame have we constantly seen? Now, before I answer that question, let's look at verse 8. This is one of those passages in Revelation that I find a lot of people read, and then they give up on Revelation. And now listen to it. It says, The beast which thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on earth shall wonder, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not, yet is. Can you see why sometimes people get confused in Revelation? All right? But that's why you come to this seminar, to get it all straightened out. We're going to see that it's really not that difficult, and this is easy understood, but first of all, you have to understand the time frame. Remember, John is having this vision on the island of Patmos around the year 100 A.D. But he specifically tells us in this vision that he was in vision and the angel carried him away. Right? And remember, as we've been studying through this, that the first half of the book of Revelation, from chapter 1 to chapter 12, was a constant recapitulation from the time of John to the end. And then it would back up to the time of John, and it would go to the end. It would back up to the time of John, and it would go to the end. And then in chapter 12, it backed up way back in the beginning to the fall of Lucifer in heaven, and it went to the end. And then after chapter 12, we didn't back up to John's day anymore, did we? And I pointed that out tonight. We studied that. From the time of chapter 12 on, we don't go back that far in our recapitulation. Revelation chapter 14, verse 7, reminds us of the time that these recapitulations go back to. Revelation chapter 14, verse 7, saying with a loud voice, "Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come." The judgment hour was the beginning point for these recapitulations after chapter 12. It would go from judgment to the end, back up to judgment to the end, back up to judgment to the end. So the answer I want you to write there is the time of the judgment. The time of the judgment. In the second half of the book, most of the recapitulations come back to the time of the judgment. Now, we studied several nights about that judgment. The judgment began at the end of that 2300-day prophecy, which was 1844. So in round numbers, we put 1800. After chapter 12, the recapitulations come back to about 1800 in that area. So in order to understand verse 8, remember that John has been carried in vision into the future, and he's standing in a timeline around the year 1800. Okay? Now, thinking that John, his frame of reference is 1800, the angel says to him, "This beast was and is not and shall ascend." Okay? And remember that this is a recapitulation of this. So, this is the time when the government is controlled by religious forces. Now, think about 1800. In 1800, the time when the religious forces controlled the government was in the past, wasn't it? Remember, Napoleon put an end to that. In 1798, Napoleon and the French army put an end to the church controlling the kings of the world. So the angel could say, at this point in 1800, it was. And then he said, it is not. In 1800, the United States was coming to the fore, a land of freedom. The French Revolution was had already broken the bonds of religious tyranny. The English nation was, what they call it, the British Empire. Freedom was everywhere. So he said, it is not. But then he said, and shall arise. He was referring John back to the prophecies that this would happen again in history when the religious forces would control the civil government. And we studied that in Revelation 13, where it said, this beast received a deadly wound, but then after some time, the deadly wound was healed. So, number 8. We'll come back to that. Number 8. The 7 heads of the beast are called, verse 9, we'll read it. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. So the 7 heads are called mountains. So these heads they're called mountains. But what is a mountain a symbol of? Well, write in the note Jeremiah chapter 31. Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 23. Jeremiah 31, 23. Says, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, as yet they shall use this speech in the land of Judah and in the cities thereof, when I shall bring again their captivity. The Lord bless thee, O habitation of justice, and mountain of holiness. So the Lord called Israel a mountain. He said, when you come back to me, you'll be called a mountain of holiness. Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 24. Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 24, he refers to another nation as a mountain. Jeremiah 51, 24. And I will render unto Babylon and to all the inhabitants of Chaldea all their evil that they have done in Zion in your sight, saith the Lord. Behold, I am against thee, O destroying mountain. So here he calls Israel a mountain, he calls Babylon a mountain. So when it says the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth, it means that the woman is sitting on 7 nations. Now, 7 means what in Bible prophecy? Complete. So if the woman is sitting on 7, she's sitting on all of them in the symbolism. So the woman sitting on 7 mountains means the woman controls all of the nations of the world. Number 9, what is the relationship between the woman and the mountain? The answer is she sits on them. Now, if your kids are getting a little unruly, and you say, I think it's about time that I sat on it. Do you mean that you're physically going to get your kid and lay him down on the floor and sit on him? Yes. Most of you evidently don't mean that. It's the way you laugh. It means you're going to get control of this kid and rein him in, right? So when the woman sits on the mountains, it means the woman controls them. You see the symbolism there? This woman, a woman, is controlling them. The woman on, so let's summarize it. The woman on the beast is a symbol of organized religious opposition. Those are the 3 words. Organized religious opposition. And, you know, we have to wait till that happens, but we're talking church when we're talking religion. We're talking a church that opposes God, opposed to God's people, which controls the power of the state to accomplish its goals. So the woman on the beast is a symbol of religion in the final era, the era of the one world government, because religion controls all the nations of the world. Question number 10. How many periods of history are given in apocalyptic prophecy? Now, we're looking at number 10 so that we can understand verses 11, 12, and 13. Before we can understand verses 11, 12, and 13, we have to answer question number 10. It says, how many periods of history are given in apocalyptic prophecy? Go back to the book of Daniel. Back to the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7. And I'm going to start reading in verse 2. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. You know what sea means by now, don't you? It means many people. So in vision, Daniel was watching the teeming population of the earth. It says, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. So as Daniel watched the teeming masses of humanity, out of those masses of humanity, he saw 4 empires arise. 4 eras of history come up, one after another. Verse 7, verse 4, he begins to describe this. It says, the first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given it. And here is the winged lion. This is what Daniel saw coming up to the sea of humanity, and later on in the book of Daniel it defines this as the nation of Babylon. Babylon was really the golden kingdom of the golden age. Babylon was really the first era of world civilization as we know it today, and Babylon was the beginning came up and it ruled the world until finally it says its wings were tucked off and a man's heart was given it. Now think of the symbolism. If a man has the heart of a lion, what is he? Courageous, conquering, and unconquerable. If a lion has the heart of a man, he's a twerp. And so he says he watched this empire come up and then fall to nothing. And then, so right in the blank there, the winged lion dash Babylon. The winged lion dash Babylon. Then in verse 5, in the vision, he continued, and behold another beast, a second like to a bear, and it raised itself up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it, and they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. So we have this bear that's kind of humped up with 3 ribs. We go back in history, and the Bible tells us what this is. This is the kingdom of Medo-Persia. When you studied it in high school, you studied Persia, because it was a lopsided arrangement between the Medes and the Persians. The Persians were much more powerful than the Medes. That's why it humped up on one side. It says it had 3 ribs. It came into existence by combining the nation of Babylon, which it conquered, and the nation of Persia, and the nation of Media, to become the Medo-Persian Empire with headquarters in Babylon. And so in your second one blank there, write Persia, or write the bear dash Persia. Then in verse, better give you time to write that down. The bear dash Persia. Then in verse 6 it says, after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. So in that vision, the next empire that would arise is the winged leopard. You might want to write that in the blank. Winged leopard. The winged leopard was a symbol of the Grecian Empire. The wings are a symbol of speed, and a leopard is the fastest animal on the earth. If you remember your high school history, the speed with which Alexander the Great conquered the world was incredible. By the time he was 25 years old, he had conquered the world. And they said he wept because there was no more to conquer. But he never did conquer himself. And there was a party one time, and they were talking about the god Bacchus, and he made a boast. He said, I can outdrink the drinking god. I can conquer the drinking god. And they had this huge cup, which was the cup of the wine god Bacchus, and they filled it to the brim, and Alexander killed it. You know what I mean by that, some of you younger guys at least. They killed it, and it killed him. And he had 4 generals, but no son. And so his empire became a 4-headed beast. They couldn't decide on one, so the 4 of them took it over. Pretty good symbol for Greece. And so next to the winged leopard, write dash Greece. Then Daniel chapter 7, verses 7 to 8 says, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue at the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were the eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Right next to that one, the 7-headed, 10-horned beast. Put that in there, 7-headed, 10-horned beast, and that was Rome. And here's the artist's description. Sometimes they call it the nondescript beast. The powers, the nations of Rome, one historian has said the various images that might stand to represent the kingdoms before it were successively crushed by the iron legions of Rome. Because it had great iron teeth. The Romans invented the iron sword. And all these, back in Babylon, they had bows and arrows and brass, and the harder. They made it bronze. But the Romans figured out how to take iron and make wire out of it. And they would make wire, and they would weave their swords out of wire. You say, well, what's a wire sword? That's pretty floppy. But once they got it woven, they would put it in the forge and get it white hot, and then they would hammer it until all those wires became one. And a Roman sword was the first sword you could shave with. They could actually shave with those swords. And when you go into battle with those kind of swords against brass swords or bronze swords, who do you think's going to win? The iron swords, the great iron teeth of Rome. The 10 horns, we're just giving you a little bit of Daniel because it's not a Daniel son. When Rome finally fell in 538, we studied that, it divided into 10 pieces. It was split up into 10 pieces. And then later on, out of one of those came an empire that destroyed 3 more. So it's a very accurate symbol of Rome. Now we have to go to the New Testament. That's as far as the Old Testament takes us. Go to Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 and 2. And you'll remember this from when we studied it back on Thursday night. You see, John lived after Rome. Well, he lived during Rome. So the prophecy continued from John's time on into the future. So when God gave John, when God picked up this series of apocalyptic beast prophecies with John, he's going to start in John's day. So Revelation chapter 13, verse 1 and 2. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. You understand what that is to what Daniel saw? Saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon its horns the 10 crowns, and upon its heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. So right in that blank, just write the beast, and probably without me telling you the answer, you remember that the beast is medieval Christianity. The beast is medieval Christianity. And we learned that when the Roman Empire fell apart, the Roman emperor moved to Constantinople and said to the church, hey, I can't handle this mess anymore. If you can have it, if you can take care of it, it's yours. And so the Christian church moved into the role of government and actually took over the government. And it says it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The Roman Empire split up into 10 pieces, and 7 means complete. The church ruled over the whole ball of wax. And it was composite because the church inherited all the government that had come before it. Next one is Revelation chapter 13, verses 11 and 12. It says, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And this is the symbol we put up for the next beast. And this was, so you can put the beast with the lamb-like horns. Can you write that in there? Beast, comma, 2 horns, or 2-horned beast, however you want to say it. Dash the West. This is a symbol of the West, led by the United States of America. And then finally, Revelation chapter 13, verse 14, speaking of the United States of America, and deceiveth them which dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had a wound by a sword and did live. So this is the final one, called the image of the beast. And the image of the beast, you can write down there, one world government controlled by the church. The one world government controlled by the church. And we studied, of course, when we were studying that this is the end. Now, when you go back and count them, notice this. Starting from the very beginning of apocalyptic prophecy. 1, 2, 3, 4. there are 7 eras of apocalyptic prophecy. 7 means what? The whole thing. That makes sense, doesn't it? So how many periods of history are given in apocalyptic prophecy? The answer is 7. 7 periods. Now we're ready to go to Revelation chapter 17 and understand the next few verses. Revelation chapter 17 and verse 10 says, how many powers, kingdoms, or eras are referred to in verse 10? All right, the angel's explaining this to Daniel, or to John. And the angel says, and there are how many kings? 7. So there are 7 kings. All right, we just read them out. Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, medieval Christianity, United States, and the one world government. There are 7 kings. Now remember, Daniel is standing in time around 1800 at the time of the judgment. And he says, 5 are fallen. So, how many are fallen? 5 are fallen. From the standpoint of Daniel in this vision in 1800, Babylon had already come and gone. That's what you write in that first blank. Babylon has come and gone. How about Persia? Had it come and gone? Yep. In the 1800s, Persia had come and gone. Greece goes in the next blank. In the 1800s, had Greece come and gone? Yep, sure had. Greece was fallen. Rome, in the 1800s, could you look back and say Rome is no more, it's fallen? Yes. And medieval Christianity. In the 1800s, medieval Christianity didn't exist anymore, did it? Napoleon put an end to that. So the angel says, 5, there are 7 kings in all. 5 are fallen. Then he says, in number 13, how many existed? He says 5 are fallen and 1 is. Okay? In 1800, did the United States and the West exist? Yes. Okay? That would be France and England and the United States as opposed to medieval power. So 1 is, meaning this one. And number 14 says, how many were still in the future? And that's verse 10. And the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue how long? A short space. Question?
Yeah, one is what?
13. 1 is, that's the West and the United States. Usually Bible commentators say the United States, but really we want to include the West, Canada. Number 13, 1 is, and the blank, you're telling who that 1 is. It's the United States and the West. Okay? And number 14, how many are still in the future? 1 is yet to come. And that next blank, you're supposed to put in who that 1 is. It's the image, it's the one world government, it's when religious forces control all the governments of the world once again. It's still in the future. And it was for John when he was seeing it in 1800. It's still in the future for us. Although it's getting closer, there are becoming more and more nations controlled by religion, isn't there? You know, I mentioned the Taliban. They control some governments. And even in the Christian world, if you've been reading the news lately, over in the former Soviet Union, the church is once again gaining almost complete control of the government in some areas. So it's, what I'm telling you tonight is actually already happening in history. Okay, number 15, we're summarizing. Talking about the beast, okay? It says, the beast was, in 1800, the era of the church controlling the government was past. And is not, in 1800s, the West, led by the United States, was advancing religious freedom everywhere. And shall ascend. Religious control of government would rise again. Okay? Number 16. Says the woman on the beast is the blank, but is of the blank. So we got to read verse 11 and find that. Now we're talking about this beast right here. Okay? Walking you through this real deliberately. The beast that was, that is, before 1800, and is not, didn't exist in 1800, even is, will exist again. He is the eighth, and is of the seven, and goeth into perdition. So the answers are, the woman on the beast is the eighth, but is of the seven. There, John is telling you what I've been telling you in this seminar. It's recapitulistic. It says, this is the eighth beast, but really there's only seven beasts. This is a recapitulism that kind of summarizes the last part of the seven. It's of the seven. See? It's another way of looking. It's a recapitulism that goes back and looks at it. Number 17. From the perspective of the vision, did the 10 horns, 10 kings exist yet? Verse 12. And the 10 horns, okay, that's the 10 horns right here on this piece. It says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, or 10 nations, which have received no kingdom as yet, but received power as kings 1 hour with the beast. And so from the perspective of the vision, did the 10 horns kings exist yet? No. Okay? In 1800, that final one world government where the church and religion controlled the whole world didn't exist yet. And the nations it was going to control really didn't exist as such yet. It's interesting that it says it's 10 horns. When we go back to Rome, there was 10 horns, and when Rome fell, out of the ruins of Rome came 10 nations. I believe that's telling us symbolically that when the United States and the West falls, there will probably be 10 major divisions of the world that will come out of that. Just what they are. I mean, countries come and go so fast anymore. I don't know what they are. But it's interesting, the symbolism. When this one goes down, there will arise another set of 10, more or less, that the religion will control, you see. But in 1800, it didn't happen yet. But it says it will, and how long will it last? 1 hour. Now okay, that's number 18. Don't want to get ahead of my outline. When will they exist, and what will they do? Verse 12 we read. Let's go on. These have one mind, and shall give their power and their strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is King of kings and Lord of lords, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. Remember, we studied that last night. This one world government, this coalition of nations ruled by religion, will finally decide that all commandment keepers, those who insist on keeping the seventh-day Saturday, those seventh-day Sabbath, those who won't give up Saturday for Sunday, they're going to be exterminated. Now, when that decision is made, then what does Jesus do? Jesus enters the battle, doesn't he? He enters the battle with 100-pound hailstones, lightnings, and thunder. And when God goes to war with 100-pound hailstones, lightning, thunders, and earthquakes, the most modern technology of every nation on the earth is helpless. Right? And he wins the battle. So now we can answer. When will they exist and what will they do? All right? They'll exist for a short time. They're controlled by the beast, the woman. They're controlled by religion for 1 hour. Now remember, prophetic time ended in 1844. So don't try to figure a day is a year, and there's 24 hours in a day, and so can't do that. prophetic time ended in 1844. An hour simply means a short period of time. Okay? For a short time, at the final end, they will unite, these nations will unite with the forces of organized religious opposition to God's people and make war on Jesus. So, at the very end, these nations will unite with religion to make war on God's people. Number 19 says, how do men fight Jesus? We'll go back to Acts. Acts chapter 9, verse 5. Acts chapter 9, verse 5. Acts chapter 9, verse 5. Jesus is talking to Paul. And Paul had been beating up on Christians. And Paul had been killing Christians. And this is what Jesus said to Paul. Verse 5, and he said, who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. When Paul was beating those Christians, Jesus said, you're persecuting me, you're fighting me. When Paul was killing those Christians, Jesus said, you're killing me. And even Jesus said that in Matthew chapter 25 and verse 40. Matthew chapter 25 and verse 40. Matthew chapter 25 and verse 40. And the king shall answer and shall say unto them, verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto who? Me. So how do men fight Jesus? The answer is fight and persecute his people. Fight and persecute his people. So in Revelation chapter 17, when the prophecy says that the woman on the beast will make war with the Lamb, this one world government makes war with the Lamb by persecuting the Lamb's followers. And who are the Lamb's followers? If you love me, keep my commandments. And the only commandment in question is the fourth commandment, the one about the Sabbath day. It says the seventh day is the Sabbath day. Number 20, verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. So number 20 says, after a short time, what will happen? The answer is, the political powers that have supported organized religious opposition to God's people will turn and destroy it. So the Bible says that these nations are controlled by the religious forces for a very short time, for 1 hour. The one world government will come into existence, but it will only last a very short time. And then the nations that have been supporting religion will turn on religion and destroy it. And that's what we learned when we studied chapter 11. It happened in the French Revolution. France was the eldest child of the church. And France turned on the church and destroyed it. The Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. It will happen again. Number 21, verse 17. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. The question says, who is still in control? God. None of this is taking God by surprise. God knows that this is going to happen. Satan's involved in a war against God, and God knows Satan's strategy, and God knows that human beings are going to side with Satan. Most of them. Broad is the way, and wide is the gate that leadeth to destruction, and many there be that go in thereat. But straight is the gate, and narrow the way that leadeth to life, and few there be that find it. God's not taken by surprise. He's still in control. And number 22, the woman symbolizes the same power as, let's read verse 18, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city over which reigns over the kings of the earth. The city is Babylon. So the answer is, the woman symbolizes the same power as Babylon. So just in brief, we can summarize Revelation chapter 17. And all of this, it's difficult phrases. I hope they're not so difficult now. Revelation chapter 17 is a recapitulation of what we've studied to this point. And it's simply telling us that fallen religion which claims to be worshiping God but refuses to obey all Ten Commandments, fallen religion will gain control of all the nations of the earth for a very short time. While fallen religion is in control of the nations of the earth, Satan will use that coalition to try to rid the earth of everybody who loves Jesus enough to obey all Ten Commandments. Because if he could do that, then he'd be the ruler of this earth. But God will win. The one world government will fall because Jesus is still King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And at the final battle,